So thank you very much for the introduction. And thanks for organizing these nanoTalks. I think they're great. And I have to maybe start with a disclaimer, as you already said. So I'm a biologist by training. So what I present today, I present as a layperson, as an interested layperson. And I do not represent the opinion of my institute or the university or anything along that lines. So if you think about innovation and the internet of the last 20 years, then there are many really disruptive changes that have come about. And just to list two examples that everyone's familiar with, the printed encyclopedia has been replaced by Wikipedia, and the telegram has been replaced by email. And those are huge disruptions. Those were multi-million-dollar services or enterprises that have been replaced by something that is better and is free. And those are just two examples. There's many more. Think about the music industry. Think about the shopping experience. Think about travel agencies. The internet really has the power to disrupt business models and to disrupt services. So how about money? This is the reference implementation of money. This is the US dollar. Conceptually, it hasn't changed for more than 200 years. And so we're all familiar with what it is and what it's good for. And the internet has attempted to disrupt that as well. There have been attempts at replacing the US dollar. I just list three of them here: DigiCash, eGold, and the Linden dollar. And none of them have worked. They've all failed. So either they didn't catch on, or those that did catch on, such as eGold, were mainly used by criminals, by gangsters, and then consequently shut down by the police. So today I would like to tell you about a new attempt, which is called Bitcoin, which has been around for about 5 years. And I took note about 2 years ago. And the more I read about it, the more I realized, at least for myself, that this is really a great innovation, really a new invention that has the power to be as disruptive as the internet itself. So before we go and discuss Bitcoin, maybe we should first discuss what is actually wrong with money. Why has money not been replaced? Well, first of all, there's really nothing wrong with money. Money works. We all have experience with using money, and we know what it's good for. We know where the limits are. You can raise some criticisms, though. So cash, the oldest form, is mostly a security risk, not so much for us as consumers, but if you run a kiosk, a business, or a gas station or something, you accumulate a lot of cash, and there is the danger of getting robbed. And if the robbing doesn't go well, you could even get killed. It is anonymous, so it facilitates corruption and crime, and it's even unhygienic. So you could say, come on, Christian, we've solved that. We have electronic money. Yes, we have electronic money. We have credit cards. We have bank accounts. We have transfer from bank accounts, wire transfer. There will be new projects such as Apple Pay that are based on credit cards and banks. And there is something in developing countries which is called M-Pesa, which is actually a great and development is not so much known here, where you use SMS to transfer money. So yes, there is electronic money, but there's problems with that as well. And the biggest problem is cost. Using electronic money is very expensive. Every time you use a credit card, the merchant has about 5% of the transaction as costs. 2 or 3% are direct fees, and another 2% are dealing with fraud, with chargebacks, with these kind of problems. And with M-Pesa and other things, especially when you do international money transfer, the costs can be as high as 10%. The World Bank, for example, has estimated that when migrant workers send money home, which is a big flow of money internationally, there's about 10% average cost associated with that, depending on continent. In Africa, it's even higher, it's 12%. So the poorest are the ones hit most hard by these costs. And then every time you use a credit card, there's a privacy issue. They get your data. They know what you buy. So there are criticisms that can be raised against electronic money as well. And there are issues that go beyond these practical issues and whether or not they're important, but I just mentioned them here. There's a legitimacy issue with money. So why do we actually accept money for goods and services? Why do we accept money? Why do I accept money as my salary? And if we're honest, it's just because everyone else accepts it as well. We don't really think about this as much. We've been taught by our parents that money is worth. Now, ever since the gold standard has been abandoned, money really doesn't have any intrinsic value, and it's just a convention. And there's one other reason why we accept money, and that is because we're legally required to accept money. Money is legal tender, so that means for example, if I show up at your house one afternoon and I break something in your house, let's say I break a violin, then you can take me to court and you can ask compensation. But what the court will grant you is a title, not the real violin. I don't have to bring you the real violin. All I have to bring you is money. You're legally required to take all compensation in money. And that, for some societies, is not legitimized through democracy. That just comes from on high. And even where it is democracy and legitimation, it's just the central bank that sets these rules, and it's very indirect. We can't never vote on the money policies. Instead, we must trust. We must trust our politicians. We must trust the central banks. We must trust the banks themselves that everything works. So this is the current status of money. And let's see how Bitcoin addresses these issues, or attempts to address these issues, and whether it is worth pursuing, or whether it's a better idea. So for any kind of electronic money, and Bitcoin is electronic money, there are three necessary ingredients, and we'll discuss each of these in turn. So you need some kind of account. It's electronic money, so it's not cash. You can't hold it in your hand. You need some kind of bank account system where the money is stored and where it's connected to you, where it's connected to your name. And then you need some kind of transaction system where the money is sent from one account to the other. And then you need some kind of money creation. Actually, I listed last, but it has to happen in the first place. Someone needs to make the money. And in our traditional system, this is really all delegated to third parties. The bank is a third party. It's not between you and the merchant that you try to buy something. There is the bank in between. Transaction systems, when one bank sends money to another, this is not a bilateral thing. There is a third party here, which is a so-called clearinghouse that both banks accept as a trusted party and then identify each other and do the transaction. And of course, money creation is also delegated to a third party, usually to the central banks and also to commercial banks as well. And you have to trust these people. You have to trust your bank to actually, when you give the money to your bank, you have to trust your bank to keep it. What if the bank goes bankrupt? What if the government decides to keep some of this money, as has happened in Cyprus, for example, in the recent financial crisis? Bank account holders were taken, some of the money was taken by the government. Also here, transactions, there's a third party that you have to trust, and the government may interfere here as well. This has happened in Argentina recently. You know, Argentina has undergone multiple bouts of bankruptcy, and recently they wanted to pay some of their creditors, but not others. And this transaction was held up by a US court because the court said, no, you need to pay these other people first. So the money that was intended for one recipient was diverted to another recipient. Likewise here, money creation serves two purposes. It's the creation of money, but also it's to steer inflation and to steer politics and to steer the economy. So you have to trust the central bank that they do this right. Now, as I will explain, Bitcoin, the main innovation in Bitcoin is to get rid of these third parties and to get rid of trust and to replace it with open source, algorithmic software setups that are democratic. They are free and voluntary. You can join them and inspect everything and test everything for yourself. So let's go through these three aspects here. First, the bank accounts. The bank accounts have a different name, but for our purpose here, for explaining, they're the equivalent of bank accounts. Now, in Bitcoin, you can create your own bank accounts, and you can create as many as you like. In fact, I brought some here. These are Bitcoin accounts. I'll pass them around. Before you get too excited, those are empty. There's no money on them. You can make your own. You can make as many as you like. You do not need a bank for that. They are free of charge. The algorithm for making a bank account is public. You can inspect and verify this algorithm. And it can be done offline and anonymously. And I will explain now in the next two slides how you make yourself a Bitcoin bank account. So first, you create yourself a random number. This has to be a very large random number. There are some constraints. It has to have so and so many bits. It has to start with a 5. This is how you recognize these kind of numbers. They have to start with a 5. You can, of course, express them as a QR code. But you can create as many as these numbers as you like, and they have to be so large to make sure that if someone else does the same, they will not come up with the same number. It's theoretically possible. It's extremely unlikely. Every time you make such a number, if you use a good random number generator, it's your number, and no one else has it. Step 2, you make a hash of your number. Now, hashing is an operation. It's a mathematically defined operation that can only work in one direction. It's easy to make a hash So to convert this number into this other number, but it's impossible to go the other way. Now this is an established procedure that's used in cryptography in places. This is not invented by the Bitcoin team. This is something that has been around before. And in fact, this is the technical implementation of it. This is your random number that you start with. It starts with a 5, and there are a couple of steps, and you end up with this hash here, which always has to start with a 1. That's how you recognize it. You don't have to worry about these details, other than to know that this is an operation that flows from here to there and cannot be reversed. This is mathematically impossible, or nearly impossible. If you have an infinitely large computer, it is possible, but it's mathematically impractical to do this in reverse. And the other thing you have to take away here is that in the process of doing this, you're generating yourself a private and a public key, and this will become important in a minute. So you start with a random number, you get a private and a public key, and you get what's called an address. And all of this you can do, the recipe is clear, you can do this on any computer, it's not very difficult to do. There's software that can do that for you. And then, the third and last step is you prove the ownership of this account. And you prove that by signing a cryptographic message with your private key. Remember here, there was this private key and the public key pair that can be used for cryptography. So you can sign a cryptographic message and email it to the world, make it public, and say, this is my account. And this message that only you can sign, because only you have the private key, establishes ownership of your account. And the account number is this corresponding public key. So this is how it looks. This is a Bitcoin account. This is the random number you came up with, starts with a 5. And this is the hash number, it starts with a 1. This one you make public. So everyone can know this number here, and this is your account number, and they can send you money. And this one you must keep private. If anyone learns about this number, they can take your Bitcoins. This is the only thing you have to really keep safe. So when you use these paper things, store them in a safe place. When you store this number on a laptop, make sure your laptop is safe and not compromised. You can also store it on an iPhone, of course. So that's the account, very easy. Now, how do I make a transaction? That's the second step. How do I transact from one account to the other? Again, in the traditional system, this is a trust-based system. There's an intermediary, there's a clearinghouse. I have to pay that intermediary. He can take any amount of days to do that, and he can be hacked or attacked by anyone. How do we do this without an intermediary? So the solution that Bitcoin came up with is to make all transactions public. There are no secrecy. Every Bitcoin transaction that ever happens is known immediately around the globe. Everyone can view and validate these transactions. And what a transaction is, again, is a signed cryptographic message. With a very simple content, there's a sender, there's a receiver, and how much money you want to send. And again, signing these cryptographic messages, that's your private key. That's this number that you initially came up randomly and that you keep secret. And the transactions are relayed and stored in a peer-to-peer network. So a peer-to-peer network is, of course, a system that has no central server, that has no central point of trust, no central point of attack, that is distributed around the world, and that's therefore very safe and very robust. In fact, I checked last night, so the Bitcoin system right now has 6,300 active nodes and is distributed around the globe. So those are the transactions. Simply sign a message, send it to any of these nodes, and the nodes will replicate it among each other, and that happens within half a second, and then the entire globe knows that you've sent money from this account to the other account. And the transaction is sender and receiver are not by name. It's not Christian von Mehring sending money. It's just one account sending money to another account. All right. Now, I've saved the most difficult part for last, which is money creation. So far, you know what an account is. They're empty. You know how to send money if you had any. How does the money come about? And this is, I think, in my view, the biggest invention in Bitcoin. New Bitcoins are awarded by the peer-to-peer network, by the software code, automatically. There is no human intervention, as a reward for a service that is done. And that service is to solve the last remaining problem, which is the double spend problem. Imagine I had some Bitcoin. What I could do is I could send a valid message to pay these Bitcoins to someone, maybe to Alice, and at the same time, or maybe 10 milliseconds later, I could make another message to pay the Bitcoins to Bob. Those would both be valid messages. I could sign them. And if I'm clever, maybe I send the Alice message to this node, and the Bob message to a different node, so the network would get two conflicting payment messages at the same time. And this is the classical double spend problem that all digital currencies have had and have had to solve in one way or the other. Usually it's solved by trust. There is a third party, again, a trusted third party that looks after this and then makes a decision. But trusted third parties are a problem. You need to trust them, you need to pay them. The government or anyone else may interfere. So how is this done without trust, without a third party? So the great innovation that was done here is in this big network of nodes, this decision which of these two messages is the valid one and which one is to be discarded has to be taken by one node. This can't be done by consensus. You could argue, let's take the message that came earlier, but that could be a few milliseconds only, and then maybe people start to fiddle around with the clocks or with the internet time and make things, and maybe don't agree on the time. So you can't just use time. You need a dictator. One of these nodes for a short period of time needs to become the dictator and needs to make this decision. And in fact, this happens every 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes, the software automatically decides one node here to become the dictator. That node makes decisions that need to be taken and then is rewarded with new money. And in fact, there's this node that is chosen every 10 minutes. It's a different node every time. It gets 25 bitcoins, which at the current market exchange rate is about $10,000. So there is $10,000 awarded to a randomly selected node every 10 minutes. And that node is the dictator. Now, how is that chosen, right? I mean, I run a node myself. I haven't gotten any 10,000 francs yet. How is that chosen? Because it's a big incentive. So what all nodes try to do to get this reward is they group all recent transactions into a block. So take all the valid transactions. And in doing so, they when there is a double spend, they arbitrarily choose one of them. The other one will become invalid. They solve the double spend problem, put all the recent transactions into a block, and then they compute an extremely difficult hash function. And this is a fiendishly difficult function, which a good computer, a really good computer, will need 10 minutes to solve. But it's random. This is the hash function that you can't predict when you will solve it. You just compute away very hard, and then on average, after 10 minutes, one computer will solve it. The first one to solve gets the reward, gets 25 bitcoins, and then adds the solved block, this is then called a solved block, onto a chain of previous blocks. And then if there are conflicting blocks, only the longest chain is valid. So only Bitcoin transaction in these blocks here, which is the longest contiguous block, are valid transactions. All others are discarded. And this process is called Bitcoin mining, in analogy to mining gold. So how's this done? And technically, so this difficulty automatically adjusts itself to keep track of CPU speed advances. The system measures how difficult this is, and then every once in a while makes it more difficult so that it keeps up with the speed of CPU growth. And the system is designed to reward 21 million bitcoins in total, maximally. And about 11 have already been awarded. And this is an arms race, right? Who makes the fastest computer has the highest chance of winning this. And actually, people have, risen to the challenge and made very fast computers. This is one of them. They don't use normal CPUs anymore. They use specialized hardware that was built just for this purpose. And the amount of computing power is humongous. Collectively, the Bitcoin network is the biggest supercomputer worldwide by a large margin. All right. So this was fast. I only had a few minutes. I hope I could convince you that the third party, the trust-based system, has been removed from all of this. And it's been replaced by algorithms, by consensus. It's completely open source. It's not for profit. And it's cryptography based. So does it work? Well, the only test to see if money is working is whether someone accepts it from you and gives you goods and services. So there are about 5,000 merchants that accept Bitcoins. Microsoft has been announcing that just yesterday that they will accept Bitcoins. This is the biggest merchant so far. There are money exchange machines. This is one I visited in Italy last week, where you can put Bitcoin in and you get euros back, or you get dollars back, or whatever. So there's a free market exchange between Bitcoin and other currencies. And the most important thing, you can buy food. So there's this is a screenshot from Zurich, actually. There's 37 food places in Zurich where you can order pizza and you can pay with cash, Visa, and so on, blah, blah, and Bitcoin. So that is the ultimate test. If you can buy food with it, then it's really money. Now I want to close with something really beautiful. Everything in Bitcoin is software. This is just a bit of software that a person has written. We don't actually know who that was. It was in 2008. Someone wrote this and released it to the public, and it's still not known who that was. But the entire agreement and the entire structure of Bitcoin is in software. And this is the first page of the software right here. And it's just C++ code. And right here, it says max money equals 21 million. And I think this is the most beautiful line of computer code I've ever seen. It is a social contract between people. Whoever downloads and runs the software agrees to this. And it's open source software. You can actually submit a change request and increase this to 25 million. And there will be a discussion and a vote, and hopefully it will be turned down. So this is the exact opposite to our current money system. It's completely removed from politics. It just serves one purpose, namely to facilitate financial transactions. It has no other purpose. No one gets rich off it. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.